Here's a photo I took of the Lagoon Nebula. What if I told you that you could take photos just like this from anywhere you live tonight? In this video, I'm going to show you how. This video is going to be all about how you would use a remote rental telescope here at Starfront, specifically one of our Seestar remote telescopes. You don't even need your own telescope. You don't need to spend a bunch of money, figure out all the complicated gear and software. If you want to just go and try to take images of deep space tonight from wherever you are in the world, you can do that right here under our dark skies using these telescopes. And I'm going to show you how in this video. So what the Seestars are ZWO smart telescopes. The specific models we're renting out currently are the Seestar S30 Pro, although this is probably going to change more over time as new versions of the Seestars come out. What this is the full frame equivalent of a 535mm camera lens. The sensor on board is a 585 MC sensor, which might not mean much to you if you're just starting out, but it's quite a nice sensor all in one compact, discrete package, controlled via one really easy to use app. So one thing I'm sure you may be wondering if you're just starting out is why would you actually want to use a smart telescope remotely? Why wouldn't you just want to buy one and use it in your backyard? The reason is you might buy a smart telescope, use it in your backyard, try to look at a nebula or galaxy, and then realize that you can't actually see it at all just because of the place you live. Most of us live in cities and places with tons of light pollution, and from these places you can't actually see most things in space. And so it's essential that if you're trying to do the best astrophotography, if you're trying to see anything you want, you need to have your telescope located under a dark night sky. So before it gets dark here at the observatory, and we can start with the fun stuff, I'm going to show you how to do the boring stuff first, which is how to actually log in and access a remote Seestar. So first, we're going to want to open up the Seestar app. You can get this on Google Play or iOS. It works on Mac devices. It works on Android, tablet, phone, etc., etc. And what we want to do is go ahead and log in using a Seestar account login. So if you were to rent a Seestar from us, what you would get is a username and a passcode. So we're going to start just by hitting the profile avatar to log in. I'm going to dump in my credentials and we'll agree to the terms of service and we'll hit login, and boom, we will be into our remote telescopes account. Now we just have to get connected to the system. We'll go to this Seestar tab, the bottom left one. We'll hit connect. And then when you open this at first, you'll see you have to choose remote here, and you'll instantly see your Seestar at the location of our observatory here. And all you have to do from this point is hit connect. And then you are into your telescope. It's as easy as that. Now that I've showed you how to log in, let me move the scope around so you can see, what your scope would be doing in real time. So that is tethered to this scope right here. And if I just hit open arm, this one. Now the actual arm of the telescope here is going to start to open up. And here you can see the front lens of the system and how it actually tracks the night sky. This tracks in alt-azimuth, so it goes up and down to follow any objects in deep space. So now that we're connected, we have the arm open. All we have to do is wait until it gets dark out, and then we're basically ready to take photos. One other thing you're going to want to pay attention to if you're using a remote Seestar is you're going to want to know what the weather is like at the place you're remote connecting into. It's super easy to know what the weather is like at our observatory. You just have to go to our status page, which is status.starfront.space. And there, at a quick glance, you'll be able to see if all of our roofs are open, if they're closed. You'll be able to see the all-sky camera view, whether or not it's new moon, full moon, what the conditions are like. And if you want more information, you can always hop into our Discord where we post a lot more detailed info, especially about the weather plans for any given evening. Okay guys, I'm in the observatory now, and I've got us connected to one of the telescopes. It's officially clear, which means we can actually start doing some imaging. So let me give you guys a brief tour of the app and the different features on how to use it. So here on this main page, we have the option to open the arm. I'm just going to click that because it's going to get the telescope closer to being ready. You don't have to hit that at all when you start. We've got 4 main tabs here. The one you're going to be most interested in for deep sky imaging, which I'll focus on in this video, is the stargazing tab. So we can go ahead and click this. And the Seestar app is going to provide us a guide of all of the different objects that are out right now, the ones that are best positioned, the different constellations, and the different types of deep sky objects that we can look at. And there's thousands and thousands of different nebulae, galaxies, star clusters, dark nebula, reflection nebula, all kinds of various things you could look at and point the scope to. One other fun option here down in this bottom tab is the Sky Atlas. So this lets us actually see a sky map of what's currently out in the night sky. So I can zoom around, zoom out, and look at what is currently out. So here we can see the summer Milky Way is rising and the moon is currently setting. This is just a really fun way to kind of look around the night sky and see what's currently up and well positioned. A lot of the times it's best to start imaging an object that's in the east early in the night so that you have the whole night time to actually take a photo of that object. And we can also use this to just explore and see what is around. So let us go ahead and pick an object to take a photo of. Let's see here and think which one might be good for us. I think I'd like to try the Dumbbell Nebula. I know this is called M27, so I can just search this up and we can say locate target position. Oh, I forgot to hit the go to button. So the telescope is going to take a photo and double check to make sure it's actually pointed where it thinks it's pointed, and it's going to rinse and repeat this process until it gets perfectly centered on the given object of interest, in this case M27, which is a planetary nebula in Vulpecula. It's a very cool little object and it's got some faint, interesting features to it. So now we've actually centered on the Dumbbell Nebula, and the Seestar is actually going to horizontally calibrate. This calibration just helps the tracking process so that you can take longer exposures and will come out looking sharp and smooth. So we'll just give it a brief moment to do that. Okay, so calibration is done. Now the Seestar is going to do a little autofocus. This is important because we want the stars to be as sharp as possible, and you're not going to get any detail if the telescope is out of focus. It's just like a camera lens, and it focuses pretty much in the same way, where it's just going to rack the focus in and out, and it's going to see where the image is the least blurry. It does all of this automatically on its own. So the beauty is you don't have to think about it, you just hit a button and it goes. So the initialization is done, and now it's actually going to start taking photos of the Dumbbell Nebula. And when you're doing a preview like this, the Seestar is actually going to sit here and do a live stack. So the longer it goes, the more detail we will get on the object. And there we go, we've got our first little live stack image in, and you can see there in the middle is the Dumbbell Nebula. And we already have a decent amount of detail here because we're shooting from a dark sky, and so this is going to become pretty visible pretty quickly. We have a couple different options on the side. First, you'll notice the LP filter is engaged and it's on red mode. If you're using a remote Seestar here at Starfront and the moon is not out, you want to make sure that that is turned off because you want to be able to capture all of the light. You don't need a light pollution filter when you're shooting from here, unless of course you want to just isolate the HA and the O3. It can be handy occasionally. But for most cases, we'll want to turn that off. So I'm going to turn off the preview here. We'll turn off the light pollution filter. And now that the light pollution filter is off, we'll get the full unfiltered view of this object. And I can hit this button and start the live stacking process again. There we go. A new picture, this one without the light pollution filter. And you can see there's a lot more stars in the background, but the actual nebula itself is a little bit lower contrast. So there's some give and take there. If you're shooting an emission nebula, you might be able to get a little more contrast without that filter in, and it could be nice. The Dumbbell Nebula we looked at a little bit earlier was pretty cool, but I kind of want to go exploring some other objects just to see what they look like. Also, there's some high clouds over that part of the sky. So let's look around here and see if we can't get something closer to the Milky Way core. If you're just starting out, one popular little region you'll probably end up taking some photos of is this right here with the Lagoon Nebula and the Trifid Nebula. So I'm curious to go look at this. I'll go ahead and slew the Seestar over here and I'll hit go to. And this Seestar right here will go slew over to that spot. And we'll start taking some photos of it. If I like how the framing looks, then we may decide to just photograph this for the night. So again, it's going to plate solve.
Object is centered.
Center the
Start
object.
enhancing image.
And it's going to start taking these photos. So after we get 3, there should be a live stack. Looks like the framing's good, but we are a little bit out of focus. And the light pollution filter is on. So I'm going to turn the light pollution filter off. We're going to hit focus and autofocus.
Autofocusing.
Should be focused, so I'm going to start the live stack again, and we will see what this looks like. So if this is actually your first time using a Seestar like this, basically what this is doing is it's going to be looping a bunch of exposures and then stacking them as it goes along. At any point, if we decide we like the result of what this is doing, we can just hit the stop button here on the recording, and the Seestar program is just going to save that as our image. And that would be probably your very first image that you've done. Alrighty, so I was interested in getting a quick look here just to see what this object looked like. What we're seeing here is the Lagoon Nebula and the Trifid Nebula. These are both 2 star-forming regions in the Milky Way core. I think this is framed up pretty nicely for us. So I'm going to decide to actually shoot this object over the course of the whole night. And so I'll show you how I set up the Seestar to actually do that for a finished image. Now, you don't have to spend a whole night on one object if you're using the Seestar. You might have more fun just shooting around the sky looking at various different things, and you'll probably have a lot of fun doing that. If you're doing this to get the best images possible, typically what you would do is you would spend one night or multiple nights on just one object. And so I'm just going to demo what that would look like, just so you could see the capability of what the telescope itself could do. So I'm going to stop this capture where it's at, and the Seestar is actually going to go ahead and save this as our result. And here, and it's going to show up in the album. Right here today, we can see this image that we captured, which is pretty neat. I would like to do longer exposures than the ones that were used for that though. So I'm going to go click these 3 buttons in the top right. I'm actually going to turn the Seestar on to expert mode, and I'm going to turn it on to 60-second long exposures. And more importantly, I'm going to turn on save each frame, because I would like to see each actual exposure. I want the raw files basically of each of these exposures so I can stack them later in a different program, which I'll be able to demonstrate to you guys once we get all the data we want for the night. So there's 2 modes. There's live and continuous capture. And one option, we can just sit here and loop multiple frames. We can select how many we want. In this instance, I'm just going to hit live.
Start enhancing image.
And I'm going to start collecting exposures, and it's going to start looping those 60-second exposures like we had earlier. So right now it is in a spot where we could actually just leave it to go all night long, and it's going to do its thing and take a bunch of images which we'll be able to save and stack together later. I'm going to hang around for a second here and watch these first exposures come in just to make sure that they look good. So I'm going to let this run, and then we'll revisit tomorrow morning and see all the data we captured. So it is the day after, and now it's time to actually log into our Seestar app here and see what the telescope actually cooked up. So the Seestar is great because it'll automatically do some image editing. It'll automatically do the stacking. And so we can just go here to my album. We'll click on what's on the Seestar, and we'll look at our stargazing album, and we'll see 2 different folders. There's the target folder on the left here, M8, which is the target we shot last night. And this clean looking photo here is the stacked image from last evening. So this uses the whole night's worth of data all into one photo and stacked. And you know, we could do some fun little editing here to this image. There's some AI denoise. I'm not going to wait for that to run. Yeah, from here we could say, hey, this is our finished image. We could download it. We could export the raw file for this image as well, which is something you may be really interested in doing, because I'm going to show you how to edit raw photos in a second. There's our raw stack automatically processed by the Seestar. Now, you'll also notice we have this folder here with 200 images. These are all of our subframes from last night, the individual files that I captured. And I wanted these because I wanted to go and stack them myself and do a complete pre-processing to post-processing with this to get the best results possible. The Seestar edit is great, but editing your own astrophotos is a big part of the hobby for me too, and I'm sure you'll see why when I show it to you. So of course we have the problem now of getting these 240 subframes off of the Seestar and onto our computer to actually post-process them or pre-process them. So doing that is pretty simple. All we need to do is we go to that folder for the M8 subs. We will click on that and then we'll select basically all of the images that we want from that session. And we're going to go ahead and hit the buttons to select all of those frames, and then we will then download all of them as FITS files. Now this is the raw file format for astrophotography processing, so we're going to want to download these as FITS, and we'll just wait for them all to be downloaded over to our phone. Now you can do this on your computer too. I'm just doing it on the phone for demonstration purposes. So once you have all of those frames downloaded, the next step is to actually zip them up. So you'll want to select all of the frames that are saved to your phone, and then you want to compress them. And this is going to save all of those files as a zip, which you can then move on to another computer, move to Dropbox, any way you want to actually move these files to where you'll do the post-processing. And again, if you're downloading these straight to your computer, like if you're doing it off of a Mac, then it's super easy because they'll already be there for you to access. What's up, y'all? We got all the files moved over to the editing computer, and now it's time to do the editing part of the video. You could, of course, just post and share around what you got natively from the Seestar app, but let's say you want to do a little bit more fancy stuff to your photo. I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, there's a couple different levels to this. There's a free level that kind of lets you do some basic pre-processing, some color calibration, and then there is more levels where it's kind of like paid programs, slightly more complicated. I'm going to take you through all of those just to see what's possible from one of these telescopes. So I cheated a little bit. I actually used 4 Seestars on one night, so it's the equivalent of shooting the same object for 4 nights. You could do the same thing just by having 1 Seestar, but I did this just to get a little more time efficiency. So the first step is we're going to actually stack and pre-process the images using Siril. This will give us a bit more fine control to do the editing and everything else we would want to do to one of these images. So I've got 4 zip files. These I just put on Dropbox from the Seestar. First step is we want to put all of these into a working directory. So I made a folder here. You're going to want to do the same. Made a Seestar folder. This is the working directory for our image. What you'll want to do is make a folder within this folder called lights. And then you're going to drag in all of the images you shot into the old lights folder. And this is how Siril is going to know what's what to actually do the processing. Next step is you're going to want to come to this little website here and download Siril. Just download, whatever version you got, the 64-bit, whatever system, just get Siril from this website, and then you'll have the program you need to actually do this editing. So let's go ahead and boot up Siril and get to work on this data set. It looks a little bit complicated when you first open it, but fear not, it's pretty easy for what we're doing. First step is we have to tell Siril where our working directory is with this little blue home button here. Crush that. And then we'll navigate to our Seestar folder, which is located right here. Now we're in our Seestar working directory. I'll say open, and now Siril knows where we're at. The next thing we're going to want to do is install the Seestar pre-processing script. So we'll hit this hamburger up here on the top right. We'll hit preferences. We'll come down to scripts, and then we'll scroll way on down on this list to pre-processing, Seestar pre-processing.sssf. You're going to want to check that select checkbox and then hit apply. And that's going to make the Seestar pre-processing script available to your program. I'm going to hit cancel because I've already got it. Next step, stay with me. This part's really, really extra mega hard. We're going to hit scripts. We're going to say Siril script files, and then we're going to hit Seestar preprocessing.ssf. There's going to be a warning, whatever, hit run script. And now Siril is going to actually go do your whole stacking process for you automatically, and it's going to spit out a raw integrated fits file, which is just basically the raw file, the same raw file we got from the Seestar itself. Why would I stack it in here versus just taking the Seestar output? This program does a couple more fancy things during the stacking process than the native app, so I'm just doing it in here to get the most image quality physically possible. All right, I'm going to stop this because I've already got my stacked image and task on this real quick, and we'll boot up Siril and continue editing. So once your Siril actually runs through and does everything, what it's going to do is it's going to spit out a process folder. You can ignore that. And then it's going to spit out your stacked fits file here. Now this is a raw stack of your whole data set. You don't just want to do this because it gives you more options. This also lets you stack multiple nights of data together. So let's say you had a Seestar with us and you ran it for a week on the same object. You can move all those files into Siril and compute that stack here in a way you can't do on the Seestar app. That's another good reason. So let's go ahead and open up this file in Siril. It'll be this fits file. And immediately you'll notice it's basically pitch black. That's just because it's a raw file, a linear file. All astrophotos look like this when they're first born because space is pretty dark and the brightness values that your camera picks up will be mostly in the shadows. But we can temporarily brighten the image here to do our processing on the rawest form of the data. All we have to do is come here to where it says linear and we'll click auto stretch. And that's going to kick us a stretched image that we can now do some things to in its raw state before we do a full in stretch. So to me, the first thing I notice that's off of this image is there's a big vignetting gradient, a bright kind of low contrast gradient that's radial around the whole image. I want to clean that up so we can get a lot more contrast out of this photo and better colors. So to do that, we'll say image processing up here. We'll go background extraction. This part's pretty simple. All we want to do is start clicking and adding samples to the background of the image. Now this is the visual background. So anywhere that's dark shadows, something that's falling into the back of the image, is valid for us to click and add a sample. Now Siril's going to look at these samples and determine what the flat background of the image should look like once we remove the gradient. So I'm just going to click around here. I'm going to make sure Siril sees that there's these spots that are a bit too bright around the rest of the image, because I definitely want to get rid of those. And we're just going to broadly click around all of these dark dust motes. This is a pretty complicated image to do a background removal on because there's not a lot of visual background, especially compared to an object like a galaxy, where there's just a small object in the middle and then blackness around. This field has a lot more going on. These samples should do us well, so I'm going to hit this compute background button, and then it's going to actually model that gradient and pull it out. So we can go back and forth between show original image and this current one, and I can tell immediately that I want to refine this some more because it's adding a bright bubble in that part of the image. So if I put one sample in there and hit compute background again, and we go back and forth, we should be able to start getting that bubble out of the photo. And it might take a couple more samples for us to get there with modeling it. Back and forth. I think we're getting into a really good place here now. And you can see what I mean with how much this does for the image. It's very important that we're able to take out gradients. You're always going to have some kind of gradients in your astrophotography, and being able to take them out is going to make your images a billion times better. So I'm quite happy with that. We'll lock it in, we'll hit apply, and that'll be our gradient corrected photo we'll continue to work with. Okay, now I want to color calibrate the image. So we're going to go to image processing, color calibration, color calibration. So this works kind of in the same way. We're going to want to draw two rectangles in the photo, one in the background and then one on a bright object. So we're going to want to start with the background. So let's say we're looking at this dust mote here. I'm going to draw a rectangle. We're going to say use current selection. And this is going to use this rectangle as our background reference. I'm going to hit background neutralization. That should neutralize the background color balance. Next step is to do the white color balance. And we're going to do the same thing, but I'm going to grab the Trifid Nebula up here. I'm going to use that as my current selection, and then we'll hit apply. There we go. So now we have an image that has a lot more neutral color tones. It's not super warm casted like it was in the raw state, which will be really, really nice for having a aesthetic photo. So we'll hit apply there. We'll close that out. Next step is to actually make this into a nonlinear photo. If I go back to the raw state, you can see the image is still mostly black. If I go to save this as a JPEG and ship it out, it's going to be all black. So we'll want to fix that by coming to image processing, stretches, and histogram stretch. And in here, we're actually going to brighten up this photo so we can see what's going on. Stretching has 3 steps. The first is you get the midtones and you're going to pull them to the left. Now we can start to see what's going on. We're going to want to do this in multiple runs. So we'll hit apply there, and then we're going to do the same thing. Middle triangle for the midtones to the left. Now we can see the background is starting to get washed out because our black point here is sitting pretty high relative to everything else. So we'll grab the left triangle and pull it up so that our black points are better for contrast. The one thing we never want to do is take the black point into the histogram like so, because now we're actually going to start clipping data. And you can see the more I do this, the less information there is in the photo. We never want to clip. So we'll come close to this hump, but we'll never cross it. And we'll just work the image back and forth, moving it left and right, or the middle triangle to the left, the black point to the right, until we kind of box in the brightness values to where you start to see some good detail in the photo. And this is looking pretty dang sweet. So we'll hit apply and close. And this is basically, level 1 of post-processing for Astro in terms of producing an image. This result will be, decently nicer than what we just get out of the Seestar program, but we can still take this a lot further. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this result, and I'm going to save it as a JPEG. We'll say save. I'll replace that other one, and we'll say save. So there we go. That is our finished level 1 of deep sky processing. Okie doke, now we're going to go on over to pixinsight. So I've saved this image before any histogram stretching, so it's still raw. And we're going to open this up into a program called pixinsight, which is paid. It's a deep sky editing program. It can do everything Siril does. It does a lot more stuff too, but it's a gigantic pain to learn and use. But that comes with some extra capabilities, which I'll show to y'all now. So we're going to open up that raw photo from Siril. This one is color calibrated. It still is background corrected. So we're not doing everything from scratch here in pixinsight. I'm just going to be showing you some of this extra functionality in pixinsight. So first, I'm actually going to rotate the image so that we can see it a bit better to do more editing with. I'll show you some of the fancy tools we have access to in here. You'll notice we have a bit of field rotation in the corners to where the stars look slightly motion blurred. I can actually completely correct this in pixinsight using a plugin called Blur Exterminator from Russell Croman. So we can run this on this image. I have this set to correct only, so we can use it to sharpen the stars. We can use it to sharpen the detail. Right now I'm going to set it to correct only, just so that it fixes all of the motion blur. And we can see before and after. Boom. That cleans up a whole bunch of that motion blur we were seeing. And it gets our stars looking a lot better. And we're actually getting some pretty great detail there, especially in the lagoon. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do to this image is actually remove the stars. So I'm also going to use this program called Star Exterminator. We're going to remove the stars and then generate an image which is only the stars. This is going to give us a lot of extra capabilities with doing post-processing in the ways that we want. The stars and the nebula often need to be treated differently. in the processing steps. So here we can see the image, how it looks with no stars in it at all. And we can clearly get a better view of the actual details in the photo. And then of course we have the stars themselves. So now I'm going to use these two images in Photoshop to actually do a bit more fancy editing. But let's remember, this is still linear, so we're going to have to stretch this just like we did in Siril. So I'm going to use histogram transformations here, just like we did in the other program. I'm just going to stretch the nebulas here just to get them into a good place. Like so. We don't have to go crazy with it, just enough to see the dust and to see the nebulas themselves. Now I'm going to save this as a TIFF file, a 16-bit TIFF. Save it as no stars, and we can bring this into Photoshop later. Okay, now I'm going to actually stretch the star-only image. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to come in with a little bit of histogram transform. And if I'm feeling fancy, I might stretch the rest of it with a different stretching algorithm like arcsine H stretch. This one preserves colors a little bit differently than the histogram transformation does, so it'll give us a slightly different looking result when I do this. We can also see the color balance of all our stars is looking a little bit green relative to the rest of the photo, but we can probably fix this up later in Photoshop. I'm going to save this again as a TIFF. And now we have our two image components to do a little bit more fancy editing to the photo. So let's open up Photoshop and get to cooking on this thing. We're going to definitely want to start with opening up our two images here from the Seestar folder, our no stars and our star image. We got those. So first step, we're going to copy the star layer over to the starless layer like so. Now we got two different layers to actually do our editing. This top layer, I'm going to name it stars, and the bottom is starless. So the star layer, its blend mode should be switched to screen, like so, and now we can turn the stars on and off on our image. The beauty of this is now we can treat both components of the image totally separately. So we can do a number of different things. I'm going to duplicate the starless layer to make a new copy, and I'm going to open up the camera raw filter with Control-Shift-A. Here we can do, whatever general processing we like to do some aesthetic things to the image. We could bump up the clarity, we can bump up the saturation. We could really deep fry the image here at this point and kind of go crazy on it. Obviously, we don't want to go too far in any one of these processes, but here's where we can start to get creative. And there's no reason you can't do these similar things like on Lightroom on your phone, for example. This is just the program I prefer to use. But whatever you're comfortable doing editing with, now is your time to actually get creative and try different stuff. I'm also going to use this to take away some color noise. Here you can see it gets a little blue and splotchy in different places. I'm going to kick that out a little bit, the color noise reduction tool. And that's looking all right. We'll say okay to those changes, and now we can see things are starting to pop quite a bit more in our photo. The one change I'm not super fond of is how these parts of the nebulas turned super yellow, and it looks quite sickly in this part of the image. So what we can do is actually use masks. So if I create a new layer mask here, I go to the paintbrush tool and I get a black colored brush, and I can change its size, make it bigger or smaller. I can actually paint away whatever I did to make the image look sickly yellow in these spots. Of course, the brightness values are a little bit different between those parts of the photo. So if I want to fix that, I can just hit Control M on the background, and we can do some curves to kind of, fix the brightness. And then we can check that before and after. And now we don't have so much of that weird sickly yellow stuff going on. Now we actually have the power to do some special editing to the stars in the image. So believe it or not, stars actually are kind of the enemy in detail for deep sky astrophotography. So oftentimes you want to make them dimmer. We can do that with the new curves adjustment layer, which if I hold Alt and go between the curves and the stars layer, That gives me the option to do curves directly to the stars. Now, what I can do is actually darken just the stars in the photo and nothing else, which gives us a lot of capability here to do what we want. We don't want to go too hard on the whole photo. Some of these stars actually look quite nice, but we can actually take away some of the visual crowding just by making them slightly dimmer. Another thing we can do here is duplicate the star layer. I'm going to relink it to the top and set its blend mode to normal. Now I can do some edits to the star layer while it's all still being screened. So what we can do is select by color range. We can click one of these bright stars, say OK. Now you see I have a mask that selects all of the stars in the photo. I'm going to modify that selection by expanding it a pixel just to grab more star. And then I can go filter other minimum to actually shrink the stars. And by changing this radius, I can change how much I shrink the stars by. I'm going to go 0.8. Typically looks all right in most photos for me. And we can check that before and after. Should provide some emphasis to the brighter stars in the image. I'm just going to fast forward here through the back half of the Photoshop post-processing for this image because honestly, the post-processing deserves more of a video on its own. Anyways, after all of this editing, I'm left with 3 different versions of the image. One from the native Seestar app, one from just some basic Siril pre-processing, and then one version with some more complicated Photoshop and pixinsight post-processing. And the results are really, really amazing for something that's so easy to use and simple. The capability of one of these smart telescopes really resembles the capability of a setup that was maybe $3,000 to $5,000 from 10 years ago. So it's super easy to actually get into astronomy these days, and especially when the telescope is so easy to use and it's already under the dark sky. So if you enjoyed this video and you want to try doing some astrophotography yourself from one of our remote telescopes, just go to the link in our description, and there you can actually sign up to gain access to any of our Seestars. We rent out the Seestars on a monthly basis, so you can pay as you go month to month, and you have full access to your own telescope to do whatever you want with. If you want to share it with friends and family, totally up to you. This is you taking the wheel on your own scope to look at whatever you want to in the night sky. And you can explore pretty much everything that's out there. There's galaxies, nebula, star clusters, and even throughout the year, there'll be tons of different objects to look at, so it really never gets boring at all. If you live in a city and you're just looking to start out, but you don't want to have to deal with driving somewhere very far away, or maybe you don't have a car, this is a really, really great option. This will let you get straight into imaging from a dark sky site, no headache. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys learned a little bit about how to use the Seestar and everything else. If you have any questions about the rental program, you can always go to our website. I'm also going to link it in the description and everything else you need. And you can ask our team here at Starfront for any questions you have about telescopes, about the program, anything else. We offer guidance to tons of different people. So hope you enjoyed. I'll catch you in the next video.